Hi, everyone. I'm Thane Rosenbaum. I'm the creative director of the Forum on Life, Culture, and Society at Touro University. And welcome to the FOLCS film series. Tonight, in partnership with our longtime friends, IFC Films, the documentary film Bad Acts, which opens nationwide on Friday. And if you check your chat box here, you'll find out what cities they're open at, as well as how you can see the film on video on demand. It is already an award-winning film. It's crushing it on the film circuit, festival circuit. It's won awards at the Critics' Choice, at South by Southwest, the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival. These are audience favorite awards, best documentary. You're seeing, this is an opportunity to hear from the filmmaker and the subjects of the film about a film that is probably going to continue to win awards. So you're in on it early, as we hope to do always at FOLCS. The film involves a Cambodian American family from the battleground state of Michigan in a rural part of the state at the beginning of a pandemic. There's a family restaurant, and the idea is that you're seeing a family trying to survive in the keeping the business together, keeping their own sanity during the pandemic. And because of the nature of our politics, the film is about many things. It's not just about a family's survival through the pandemic. It's about racial tensions in the United States, political divisions in the United States. And somehow this film seems to capture, as a documentary, so many things on so many themes that we've all been living through, but not from the perspective of an American minority family, Cambodian Americans. And important to know that the father of the film is a survivor of the Cambodian genocide. So this is a real refresh of a family in America. This is a true American story at a time where America may have forgotten itself on what it means to have the American story. And this film is a reminder of what this country is and what it can be. We have with us tonight the filmmaker, David Siev, who is also the son. He's a family member, so this is very much a Valentine to his family. Welcome, David. Congratulations on all the awards.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here this evening.
And your dad, Chun, is here, and your sister, Jaclyn. And let's see if we can meet them. Chun, Jaclyn, welcome. It's important to know there are many family members in the film, but I think there's a reason why we're seeing Chun and Jaclyn. They are the poles around which this film circles in many ways. The whole family's in it, but they're for reasons that we'll get to tonight. They are the centerpieces, the core of this family, at least through this experience. If you're watching us live on YouTube, and I know thousands of you are, welcome. We love having you. Thanks for joining our channel. Please go to folks.org and leave your email address so you can get notifications of future events. If you have a question for the Sievs, either David, the filmmaker, or the subjects, Chun and Jaclyn, leave it. I will start off by saying, you know, we've been in business for over 15 years, and we have done hundreds of films. This, honestly, is one of the best films we've ever shown. I can tell you without any question, this film will change you.
Wow, no, thank you. That really means so much. I know you guys been around for quite some time, and to hear that comment, in that our story seems to be really resonating with audiences everywhere. I know it means a lot to my family, and it means a lot to me. So thank you.
Well, David, speaking of family, people will fall in love with your family here. I certainly did. I was just curious if it's possible if the family could adopt me, because I would join in a second. I'm a Jewish guy from New York and Miami Beach, Florida. My parents were Holocaust survivors. I think I'd fit in nicely. I think I could work in the restaurant. That there is something so romantic about this story that you really want to be a part of it. And so again, congratulations. Let's start off by saying the film is it's an adventure and a risk-taking venture. During a pandemic, the filmmaker's son moves back into the house of the family. Everyone seems to come home. The sister who invested the funds that she had earned as a businesswoman reinvests in the family business. And the whole family seems to come back to work during the pandemic to do two things: to keep the family business alive, survive, and also to make sure their parents are safe because they're otherwise vulnerable to the pandemic. Was there a vote on how this, at some point you show up with a camera and someone says, David, what are you doing? But it doesn't really explain, was this a family decision that allowed you to have such access with the family, intimate moments over a several year period? Did anyone object? Did you have to fight them for this?
I mean, to be honest, I always like filmed my family. I was always going around and filming birthday parties and special moments. So, when I moved home in the pandemic, it was no different. I mean, it always, and I think that's what lends the film to the intimacy and the rawness is that, it's almost like the camera's not there. When Jaclyn or my dad are talking to me, they're just talking to me as David, either the little brother or the son. So
yeah, but David, at some point, it becomes clear that you've got something special here and you want to share it with the world. So that's very different from birthday parties. That's very different from what you did. Right, that's very different. At that point, there's that really great money shot, frankly, with your mom, where she says, David, you don't live here. To me, that's the key line in the film. You don't live here. You don't have to live with the consequences of having everyone see what you've done during the pandemic in this rural community of Trump supporters, where there's very strange racial tensions going on in the aftermath of George Floyd. The family decides to take a political position to stand with the demonstrators of Black Lives Matter, knowing full well that it might have risks to the business and risks individually to persons, especially to Jaclyn, who did in fact receive threats. So at that point, it's a very different ball game. And I'm wondering whether the line of your mother, when she says, you don't live here, whether this was being shared by others saying, you're putting the family in danger. We all moved home to take care of the family, and now you have exposed the family.
Yeah, I think it was really from my parents, if anything. Like Jaclyn was actually always really supportive. And I think, you see that generational tension of, my parents, when they started a business in Bad Axe, their American dream was very much keep your head down, get to work, pay your, try to pay your mortgage, try to keep your family together and try to send your kids to college, right? Whereas like, the film is such an exploration of the American dream. And like part of our American dream, it includes all of that, and I'm speaking on behalf of Jaclyn as well too, but it's also being able to like have a voice and responding to that call to activism and being able to create change within our own community. So Jaclyn was, was very supportive of it, but it was actually in the editing process was when, and I'll let my, Jaclyn and my dad speak.
I'm going to ask her a question as soon as you're finished with this.
Yeah, that's when like that, trust as a filmmaker became so important, because you're right. It's one thing to film birthday parties and, in intimate moments. It's another thing when you start cutting it together, editing it, portraying your family members as these characters with arcs and flaws and going through their own journeys, right? So that's where that element of trust and getting permission became very important.
Right. Well, I'm going to get back to this too, because I want to talk about, in the general theme of a documentary, this loses some of its objectivity because the son is making the film, right? It's a very different, and we'll talk about that soon. So trust is a key thing. But it's even here, it's the trust of a family member. It's not the trust of an outsider who you would have had less confidence in. An outsider, had someone come to you and said, I had this really great idea. I'm going to move into your family. I'm not Cambodian, I'm white, but I'm a really good filmmaker. Let me live with the family and film, see what I get. And we know that would have been a very different movie, right? Jaclyn, so let's talk about the Black Lives Matter protests. You're clearly, the movie's called Bad Axe because that's the name of the town. But let's be clear, you're the badass of the family. and you prove that in the film, in the protests. So a few things. You have your own money in the movie. In the restaurant. You've moved, it's clear. You've done this for the family. You've You've made it possible for the family business to grow.
Right.
And then you move back, right, during the pandemic to care for your parents. At the same time, you choose a path for Black Lives Matter that does expose the risk. And it's even worse than that. You're not even a passive demonstrator. You're a very active demonstrator. In fact, one could argue you're instigating, you're in the face of neo-Nazis. Here's a Cambodian American girl who's half the size of these guys, and they're carrying guns, and you're in their face calling them a coward. And your chips are all in on the restaurant. This is a very complicated plot moment. So tell us about that.
It is. It really is. You know, and I think it comes down to is so if I start off with the Black Lives Matter, so we purposely went a little bit later into it because we were like, well, maybe if we go later, it'll be, you know, after when things calm down. And, you know, so we went and and I remember we got there and seeing how there was like 200 people there and I got choked up because honestly speaking, if I'm being frank, I never thought that something like that would happen in Bad Axe, Michigan, let alone that many people would show up to support. So it was like one of those things where like Bad Axe proved me wrong and I got choked up seeing all these people come out to support. And then I remember watching those 3 men walk in with their guns. And I guess you could say I'm a passionate person, which, you know, can be good and can be bad. It goes both ways. But I was so angry in that moment. Like, how dare you guys walk into our town and our, you know, our home and ruin such a beautiful moment? Like, how dare you ruin it for, I mean, not just me, but everybody there. How dare you? And so I was just so angry. But if I'm being honest, I did not know that they were actual neo-Nazis, that, you know, the one was an actual leader of like a national white supremacy group. I didn't know that. At the time, I had no idea who these men were. I thought maybe they were just, you know.
But nothing would have changed your reaction, right? In other words, you weren't playing for the camera. You didn't do this for your brother.
Oh, no.
It's not like your brother said,
No.
you know what would be awesome? If you instigate a fight. That would be awesome.
Oh,
I would
absolutely. No, absolutely. No, I would do it regardless of if the camera was there or not. Right. And I think even Dave, we've had this conversation before where David actually is talking, he's like, I feel like I didn't even capture everything there because he was like, you know, like me, like so in the moment and so like, you know, there's a few shots from it, but you know, I think that even like our whole family, my little sister as well.
Well, and your husband is in it, which to me in that scene is very complicated because your husband.
You me even at one point hand my sign to him, and I was like, "You hold it in their face."
Yes, exactly.
Because, you are a white man with privilege, and they recognize you in this town. Like in this town, you know, our Bad Axe is 97% white. That's you know an actual statistic. And so you know it is very, very complicated. And I think at that time I was just so, you know, I was very frustrated with having to, you know, we always bite our tongues. Not all. And first, let me preface this with, I do love my hometown. I love Bad Axe, just like I love my family, and just the same way I love my family and we have our disagreements and our differences. That's the way I feel about Bad Axe. So there are things that I love about it. And there are things, of course, that I'm frustrated with and I wish I could change. And, you know, I think that when it comes to the restaurant, I've always loved the restaurant. I'm like that crazy daughter that, you know, even when things were at its worst and it's like, maybe we should just let it go. I would be like, but what if we tried this? Like the restaurant's like my home. I literally grew up, you know, in the restaurant. I think, I don't know, maybe it's being the oldest sister and feeling like that responsibility to, you know, take care of my siblings, but also my parents. Like I do love the restaurant.
So Chun, you were going to say something and I'll let you do that, but I also want to ask you a question about this because it's now said twice that, you know, we keep our head down, work, you know, we're American family. We're not here to, you know, we're not here for a political message. That's not what the Sievs do, right? But that's what the Sievs do in this movie. And so I'm wondering, as a survivor of the Khmer Rouge, your story is so already compelling. You must felt an enormous amount of conflict, emotional conflict. On the one hand, you know, you want to protect your family, and this Jaclyn's position. You're already exposed on the pandemic. You're trying to save the business, and now we're involved in Black Lives Matter. Is this really what we should be doing right now? But on the other hand, you're a survivor of a genocide. And I wonder whether you said, yeah, that's my daughter, go girl. You are the legacy of the survival of the Khmer Rouge. And of course you would do something like this. Of course you would stand up for people of color. I wonder whether you felt a particular conflict as the father in this scenario.
I do. It's like I said, that was during such a tough time that when Jaclyn and I, we always have our conversation going along with their mom, right? And one thing that I do understand, Jaclyn have big investment in the family business. This girl gave everything what she got and spent so many hard working day, months and years to build this business. And the other thing what I want to answer, why in the fuck you guys want to burn it down today? Right? And then that was just, no, it was just, it's a moment.
No, Jaclyn, that happens all the time on a folk show. So
Okay.
our audience loves that. Our audience share just spiked up.
No, I think that is a real feeling as a father that tried to spend so many years building the business. And then here we go, my daughter have the nerve, have the gut, have the courage to stand in front of a man with a hand on the trigger. I say in Cambodian, I'd be dead already if I do such thing like that.
Yeah.
But my daughter is one of those, they call her a Chinese bitch, you know, that Asian bitch. And then, you know, get me mad that how dare you call my daughter like that. I might be scared, but when you piss me off, now I'm going to go all in with my family.
Well, you know, the audience doesn't yet know this, but they will learn it when they watch the film. Chun is many things also. He's also a phenomenal vocalist. David's actually a very good rhythm guitar player, by the way. But Chun also was a martial arts instructor for many years, and he's a marksman with guns. So he's not the kind of father that you want to mess with. If you call his daughter names, it's probably a mistake. So there's so many, again, psychologically, there's such complexity to this movie. What he said before about burning this down, because in the film, Chun at one point says a remarkable comment where he says, the fear of losing the restaurant, that fear he hasn't had since he was a child in Cambodia. And I'm thinking, wow, that's a powerful comparison, right? That's the analogy, that given everything that he rebuilt, right? And everything that he's done, he's put all his kids through the University of Michigan. What a success story this is. This family is ridiculous. And now he's faced with the same feelings of vulnerability and fear that he experienced as a small boy, literally on the run every day until he got to Thailand. You know, very powerful for him to come to this part of his life with that reflection. Let's go back to this point about objectivity, subjectivity, David.
Sure.
So documentaries are often, they're documents, right? That's the point. They're storytelling, they're truth-seeking, but in the end, they're testimonial and they're supposed to be documents. One of the things is they're supposed to be objective. And in this film, it's impossible for you to be objective, right? Because you too have everything invested in the movie. And even though it's true, you're the only one that moved to New York, you moved away. You know, you're clearly a Siev. There's no question. Right. You're an honorary, I'm an honorary member, but you are a Siev. So was your concern that, look, I'm going to make a movie out of this and I need it to be taken seriously? Does a filmmaker in that position say, there's certain rules here of stepping away? And how do you step away when you're living in the house? These are your parents, your sisters. It just seemed to me as a filmmaker, as an artist, as a documentarian, almost a very impossible position for you to be in.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, you know, going from, you know, the filmmaker side of the brain to the, you know, being the member of the Siev family, being the brother, being the son, right? And more of those struggles, I think, came in, you know, during the editing process. And and I say that because in the early edits of the film, you know, I was coming from a very frustrated place with where our country was at. You know, I mean, I started editing right around the time the Black Lives Matter movement happened, and you know, there was a lot of frustration I brought into the editing room as far as where our country was at. And you know, I've always said that before, even before I picked up the camera and started making this film. I always wanted to share our family's story. But
you must have realized, I'm sorry, you must have realized that the story was changing, right? That the movie was changing simultaneous, everything was changing in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, people, you know, sometimes we forget that Black Lives Matter is the first summer of a pandemic that began in March, which meant that the pandemic itself was a baby. It was only in its 4th month, right? So much had already happened. And now this happened. So at some point you must have realized my camera is now pointed yet in another direction. And it's not, it's about my family, but it's not about my family.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying, you know, like when I started editing after the Black Lives Matter movement, there was this realization that this American dream story I wanted to share and thought I was going to write a script about one day, about, you know, how this family overcomes, you know, every odds and ends up, you know, turning a failing business into one of the most successful places in the community. I always thought that was going to be a script I wrote, but through all these hours of footage and everything that I was capturing, it became clear that this American dream story was still unveiling itself in this very uncertain and unpredictable year we were living in. And Black Lives Matter was Black Lives Matter was one of those moments where it was like, oh my God, like here we are still fighting so hard to keep our American dream alive, you know, in the face of a pandemic, in face of the racial reckoning we were going through, and a very divided nation. It just became clear that, like, if I wanted to share my family's American dream story, it had to be told in 2020. It had to be in the form of this documentary filmmaking. And I just had to stick with it and just, you know, and see what else life was gonna unfold that year.
Well, but also the complexity of the politics of the time that we lived in made it so that it was also Asian lives matter. It's not said, but it's implicit in the movie that Asian lives matter. What's also implicit in the movie is that the American dream can look like an American nightmare, that they can look like two things at the same time, right? The word for that, it's called complexity. It's not one or the other, it's both, really. That this movie actually shows you the dark side of the American dream, where the American dream can actually reveal itself in nightmarish qualities. Right? The movie is shot large. It's very wintry. You know, it seems to me in the movie shot, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of summer in the film. You know, it feels like it's set in December in the darkness of Michigan, when Michigan gets cold. And so I just think it really changed what your original vision. You know, you were forced into making a very different film because of the times in which we were living. So let me ask you this. What is it that we didn't see, you know, the proverbial, the film that was left on the cutting room floor?
Well,
you must have had hundreds of hours of film. What else is there? And maybe Jaclyn and Chun could also say, you know, I remember some conversations that we had as a family about this that never got into the movie. I'm just curious, what else? Because I think many viewers are going to be curious, what else happened? You were living there. Is there something that in the end you said, you know what, this movie is already loaded. I can't tell that story. I can't do that too. It deviates too far.
Well, I think, you know, when I was saying when I started editing, I sort of lost track of like why I was making this film. Like, yes, I wanted to tell this American dream story, but in those early edits, I started doing it in a way that wasn't most effective, that really, I think, showed the anger that I had. So, you know, the early edits of the film, it was so much more like news soundbite heavy and more of this documentary that was me trying to, get on my platform and, point out all these issues that were going on in our country.
But that
became
that's an advocacy film, right? So the audience
became,
can
yeah,
understand.
yeah, exactly.
That's a very different movie. That's an
exactly.
That's David Siev taking a political position.
Yeah, exactly. It became an advocacy film, and there were moments that the really tough conversations we had as a family where the question was like, wait, David, why are you even making this movie? Because this is no longer sharing our story. This is you like hopping on the soapbox. And, I think the result of that would have been me preaching to my own echo chambers. And
we were also like, the whole town of Bad Axe is going to hate us. If they
Jaclyn, who's going to hate us? I'm sorry.
The whole town of that was
Axe,
one of the things that we said to David. We're like, we don't want that. We still live here. We don't want, and then I'm exaggerating when I say the whole town, but 70% or 60%.
Yeah, but no, I think it's important for the audience to know that you had a taste of it, and it's in the movie when people respond to the mask requirement in the restaurant. So the anti-mask people show up and make it known. And of course, they show up to the Cambodians restaurant, right? Of course, that's where we're going to go, to the successful Cambodian restaurant. And we're going to make an example there of we shouldn't have to wear a mask. So there's a teaser in the movie that things are precarious in Bad Axe, that this family is established, but they're vulnerable. And it adds a level of complexity. So I'm wondering, Jaclyn, Chun, I want to hear more about that, like other conversations that may have come up that are not in the film, or other ideas that are not in the film, or things about what Jaclyn just said. I don't want the town to hate us.
Well, and I think that, what we're talking about, things that, didn't make, there is a scene where I FaceTime David and, I was hysterical. I was bawling. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't, whatever. People can say what they want to say because I know who we are and, what our family is or what our restaurant. But then there are times where it really does, get to you, because you're like, it's not like, I just moved to Bad Axe last year. We grew up in Bad Axe. Our family has had a restaurant here for 25 years, and we've, very much been a part of the community. We do all sorts of fundraisers for the schools, for, different causes, anything that people come to us and ask for donations or gift certificates. And we always say yes, and so I think that when we did get some of the backlash right after the Sissel came out, I think that was a moment for me where I was like, what the heck? Like, I thought we were a part of this community, but if I was truly a part of this community, how can you be so quick to be like, we're never going there again, without even seeing the movie, just from hearing, us speak up on, certain beliefs that we had that might be different than yours, because that's certainly not how we treat our customers. Like, our customers, it doesn't matter what they believe or where they're from or anything. We give them the best service and serve the best food that we possibly can, no matter who it is. So,
but what's not in the, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, finish.
No, you're good.
I was going to say, what's not in the movie that I thought was interesting, which is that you were very subtle, David, because you didn't say what Jaclyn just said. We are in this community. We're with you guys. We're giving you gift certificates. We are part of this community. We feel that we're Cambodian Americans that live in Bad Axe, and we're proud of that. But you don't say, here's a white person's restaurant down the block, similar to Rachel's, also very, very successful. And one of their family members marched in Black Lives Matter, and no one's freaking out there. You didn't say that. And so to me, it's implicit that it's because you're Asian that it invited the backlash against Rachel's in a way that might not have happened to a very similar restaurant 2 blocks away, where they marched, quietly or not quietly. Now, again, I don't know if that was true, but it does leave that question open. You don't hammer the audience with that allegation, right? You don't you don't accuse them of deliberate Asian racism to me, it's implicit. So can you address that a little?
No, and to me, it had to be implicit because, going back to my original point was that, I at the end, when I realized in the editing process that this film had to be one that had to come from the most personal aspect, that had to come with a message of love. It just had to show our experiences for what we went through during the pandemic. And so I felt like it didn't need for me to come out and be explicit, or any of us to say, other restaurants aren't doing this. You're seeing it happen right there. Like, do you think the restaurant down the street is getting a letter telling them to go back to Cambodia? No, it's
even worse than that.
It's worse than that, right? They're not getting
the line that Jaclyn reads it twice. It's very effective. The line is twice where she says, "You can always go back," right? It's not go back. It's much worse. The language, right? The nuance of the sentence is worse than go back. It's you can always go back, which is to me juxtaposed against this wonderful shot of Chun hoisting up the American flag.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Wait, let me get this straight. The family that you just said, oh, you don't love it here in America. If you don't appreciate being here, you could always go back, right? And look at Chun is hoisting up the American flag, and he tells us in the film, he was able to, this country gave him an opportunity to truly realize the American dream, and he's never forgotten that. It never occurs to him. No, there's not a moment that he doesn't feel grateful to this country. And his daughter gets a letter that says, you can always go back, as if the option is available to you, because obviously you don't love America. See, that's the implication of that sentence. Obviously you don't love it here, because if you loved it, you'd shut up and you would not stand in a Black Lives Matter protest. Jaclyn, you want to add to that? Got anything?
No, I mean, I think that, and let me just say, when we first got that letter in the mail, it was sent to the restaurant. My mom was actually really mad at David and I, because she's like, this is what I thought would happen. It was, and then obviously it was to be upset with whoever sent the letter and try to dissect every single word you possibly can to figure out who it could be, or like what group of,
By the way, did you at some point said, we'll find out, did you?
We didn't. We did. We tried to compare it, because if you read the whole letter, it's grammatically and like logically just all over the place. So we try to compare it to like Facebook comments that were like, okay, who is like, just and we never did. We never did find out.
Can I ask Chun a complicated question? There's no scene, Chun. If David was scripting this as a feature, which is sort of what he wanted to do in the beginning. He didn't know he would become a multiple award-winning documentarian. At the time, he's thinking something else. So had he done it as a feature, some Hollywood executive would have said to him, we need the scene where the white family stand in front of the restaurant with their arms around Chun and the mother and the whole Siev family. So I'm asking a complicated question. What was that a possible scene in the film, or were you surprised, as much as you love the town, because of how loaded our country has become, how dangerously volatile it's become, how fearful people are to speak their minds about a blue state, a red state, Trump, non-Trump, that they're so afraid that that the kinds of people that should have stepped up and stood in front of Rachel's and say, I stand with the Sievs, didn't show up because of this very provocative, chaotic time in American politics?
I have to say that 2020 really bring up a true color of many people. The people that sometimes you thought was your friend, right? You sit down, you have coffee with, you sit down, you have donut with, since the beginning of that business.
Attended each other's family functions.
Right. And that's one thing that, anything can teach me a great deal about that. But also at the same time, I also learned that too, that there are some people that I didn't expect it turned out to be a pretty happy, decent people. To say, yeah, the Siev's kid have the right to do what they wanted to do. I had a phone call to me personally, say, how dare you let your kid do that? You know, and you know, how dare you let Jaclyn do that? She's the one causing the trouble. How dare you let David do that? How dare you let Raquel do that? I'm kind of like, what the fuck you talking about? You know what? I raised a smart kid. I want my kid to be outspoken. And all these years, I want my children to do the right thing. And when is the time that's the right thing must be done? It couldn't pick any better time than that. So you learn a lot about 2020. Whose bully is your friend? And then it's a bully shocking and at some point.
But
So
I
you're
will
saying
say
some
there
people
were-
surprised, you're saying some people actually surprised you who showed
Yeah.
up that you might not have expected.
Absolutely.
And
Yes,
some
yeah.
people who you might have thought would have showed up
Yes.
didn't because maybe they were afraid.
Yep.
And I think this is an important point because fear plays a big part of this. This is not to say that they're not your friends. It's not to say that they don't support you. It is to say that this time in American political discourse is so
Right.
volatile with social media and with just the kind of the in-your-face anger that people express toward one another, like that scene with the maskers that came into your house, to the restaurant, the anti-maskers. The level of enmity, of hatred is so apparent, and it's so ugly to look at. It's ugly. They don't see that. They don't see the ugliness. That I can see, you know, that it's a complex story. We go, I don't know if I can even blame the people that didn't stand for us because they're afraid. It's a small town and they don't want to be in this position. Oh, you're standing with the Sievs? That's it. We're done with you.
Exactly. Because you know what it's the bottom line is you got some of the people, that's why I say you see some true color of the people. Some of them worry so much about their pocketbooks, about the small business that they have. They kind of like, you know what, I'm not going to stand with you on that. And that is the true color that you say, wow, you know what, in a time like this is when we need to stand together for the right thing. Put your boot on the ground and get packed up and you shine away from it.
I don't want to get too personal, but I'm going to for you with both. I'm curious, and there's a reason that you one day might say, oh, I see why he asked that question. It seems to me that David and Jaclyn inherited something from Chun. Not that the other children didn't, but there's a reason why they're on this camera and the others aren't right now. That they've inherited the sense of the legacy of the survival of a genocide. You know, there are people, and I can tell you in the area of Holocaust literature, this is a very common idea of second generation transmission, heredity, as if it's transmitted and to the next generation instinctively through the genes, and that's what inspires, what motivates them. Some of their actions could be understood as if, I mean, we know from the movie that David's first movie was a feature, a short film about Chun's survival as a boy, right? I mean, I think if I recall. So obviously, David, this has been in your head and in your heart as an artist forever. And Jaclyn's spirit, it's so clear that she is, you know, a copy of her father. You know, I mean, they look twinned to me on camera, spiritually. So I'm wondering whether you feel that that's true, that you don't want to. It's not in the press materials, but it's true.
You know, it's so funny that you say that because I feel like that is something, and I mean, here I am admitting it in front of my dad. I always say, I'm not you, I'm not like you know, and, you know, I'll be like, I have no pride. Like, you have too much pride. I have no pride. But when I feel the same way. And I think that, you know, obviously that's why we butt heads a lot, because we're just both very passionate and we're very protective of our family. Like we want to do what's best for like the family. We're always thinking about our family. And that, you know, that includes like ourselves, but like our family and ourselves go one and hand in hand together. There's no separation, at least, not for me. And I mean, I think I can speak for my dad, but it's weird that I don't know how to explain that connection that my dad and I have. And I actually just recently, somebody a couple of years ago, I think brought up, with the Holocaust survivors and like the next generation. And I went down this whole rabbit hole and I was like, yes, like and I don't know all the studies behind it and everything, but when I was reading it, to me, it was like a light bulb moment, because I'm like, maybe that's why I am the way I am. But also, like, that's what I always understand, even if I don't agree with my dad and his thinking, I always understand what he's thinking and why he's thinking it, which is also why I can argue with him, because I know exactly like what he's thinking, like what, the 20 steps backwards or 20 steps forward. I know like what's in his mind, because I just feel like we're, very spiritually connected.
I think, through many interviews, I always say that, I have a really outspoken children, but my wife always be the one that to correct me or to say to me. It's not because I say anything wrong. My wife said, well, look at you. Where the hell you think they get it from? But
yeah, but this is different. Yeah, go ahead, Chun. I finished that up because I want to.
Like I say, the only difference is that I just have a different way of changing things compared to they are. Probably I have a little bit more patience. I do more thinking when there's need to, and they do a really instant, what needs to get done right now. Okay.
Right.
And I think that's why we have so much in common in certain things, but sometimes it turns out like we always bump head with each other. If I say,
I still want to. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I still want to get back to this. Maybe David will jump in here too. It's true what your wife says about your temperament and personality. You're admitting it here. Right. Okay. But I'm talking about a different kind of inheritance, one that isn't really tied to your temperament, but it's tied to your history. Right. Something that's not about your temperament, but it's something that Jaclyn and maybe that David, that they're trying to vindicate the crimes committed against. I mean, we know about Jaclyn's relationship with Ma, her grandmother, your mother, Chun. It's very powerfully stated, very emotionally stated, very effectively conveyed, David, and very convincingly conveyed, Jaclyn, clearly. There's even a visit to your mother's grave, right? So I'm just saying the Cambodian genocide haunts this movie. It shadows this movie on every frame. And I want to make that point, because I think it's there. I think it's there on every frame. So that's why I'm saying it's beyond temperament. It's more mystical to me. David?
It's 100% more mystical, and it's really, I think, the spirit of in some ways what drives this film. And I say that because I wanted my grandmother's presence to be felt throughout this film. That was one of the most difficult, but one of the most important threads to tie through from the beginning to the end of this, because it's, I guess less of a vindication to the killing fields, but more of an ode to her resilience. And that's why when the ending of the film,
so you're saying it's not a lamentation, right? It's not supposed to be mournful, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be about the optimistic and positive and assertive. It's not supposed to be mournful.
It is, but for me, it's giving the taste of the horror and the tragedies, my dad and my grandma had to go through. I mean, and at the end of this, this baby come at the end, this restaurant, turning into around. The reason why this film is even being made is because of the resilience of my ma and my dad and what they had to go through in Cambodia and coming here and working to build the American dream. And you're seeing us still working together, this next generation, to keep that American dream going. It's what pushed me to even finish this film in the first place. I mean, I tell this story in Q&As, but 9 months ago before South by, I had $101.99 in my bank account. I maxed out all my credit cards. I was broke trying to finish this film. And, Jaclyn and my brother-in-law, Mike, they wrote me a blank check and they told me, you've worked so hard on this, go and take care of yourself. And while I will forever be grateful for that, I could not get myself to cash that check. I wanted to figure out this last part on how to, be financially stable, how to support myself on my own. And the reason for that being is because I think back to my grandma, I think back to my dad when he was my age, after having survived a genocide and coming to this country and having 3 kids and fighting so hard just to make it in this country. It's like, I'll be damned if I don't have that same resilience, or at least try to at least finish a movie.
Well,
and so that goes beyond the film. And I think you're right when you say that, it is something that has trickled to Jaclyn and myself, and hopefully the next generation with that baby at the end.
Well, for sure, Jaclyn. I want to say it's not just the resilience that both of you inherited Chun and his mother's resourcefulness, right? It's not just resilience, it's resourcefulness. That, damn, if I'm going to cash this check, I can do this. I got this.
How are we going to serve? I mean, even when the restaurant shut down, so many places, and we were like, okay, what do we need to do to survive? We came up with the craziest things. We started doing things we've never done before. That's why the first sushi night was a complete mess. But we learned from our mistakes. But, we weren't going to, even with the restaurant being as slow as it ever was, we were like, okay, but this isn't the end. Like, I don't know how, but we're going to find a way because we have to. There's no other choice. Like, we have to figure out a way to get through this. And, we can do we came up with some really silly things and some good things that we still continue on today. With like,
but you're saying that's an example of resourcefulness.
Yeah,
we'll try anything, we'll do anything.
And I think that the other part too, they're talking about Jaclyn and David and, the other 2 children that we have, how they turn out to be so tough and so passionate and so brave about what they do. Because I always tell them this is a story when they was younger, you know what, you can't be fucking idiot like that. You gotta keep fighting. If you ever know what I've been through, okay, you can do that. You can do that. Ever since they was old enough to understand, I always preach that to them. It's about how I survived Cambodia.
Yeah.
Okay. And I always say, you know what? If you can put up with me for 20-something years before you got married, you should be able to handling just about anybody's out there. But just remember how tough I put you through.
But I wonder whether David and Jaclyn and the other children appreciate or realize that you're not necessarily typical of a survivor of a genocide. For instance, there's been a lot of literature, and it includes Cambodians, by the way, that many survivors simply refuse to speak at all about what happened. And they refuse to say things like that, like, given what I lived through, for fuck's sake, right? You can do this, given there are some who are so broken and so shattered that they don't speak at all. And the children have a hard time living with the silence of that, which I think is a different idea. I just want our audience to realize this is a very different portrait of a family survival of a genocide. The audience has met Chun Siev. They know the guy, they know the person, they know what we're talking about here. This is a martial artist. This is a lead singer in a band and a guy who can handle a machine gun. Of course he's going to say the things he says, but we could find other Cambodian families with children who would say, I never got a word out of my dad. and it killed me because I didn't know. So I didn't really know how to respond to this legacy. David, it seems like you've got something to add here.
No, it's something, as I continue to meet other Cambodian Americans who have parents who have survived the genocide, I do realize how truly, truly lucky I am to have a father who has, not only shared these stories with me from me being a really young age, but in more recent years has begun to share how these stories has affected who he is as a father, who he is as a person. And when we show this,
you're saying, wait, hasn't affected his parenting, or has affected?
No, it absolutely has. He's been very open talking about, like how his trauma and, what he's been through affects the way he looks at everything in life. And after having met, other, first generation Cambodian Americans, and realizing that their parents, not many of them do talk about that. I am so fortunate. I am so lucky. It is what drives me. And I want to make sure like these stories, have a way of being told and living on. And I am so grateful to have a father who has always been open and sharing, his stories of Cambodia.
Chun, I was wondering whether you could tell the audience your journey, your story. There is almost an absurdity to it. It's surreal, right? Your survival is surreal. How you did it, how you came with your siblings. You were like a little boy, literally running each day to find a way to get out of Cambodia. And so your story of coming to this country, it must feel for you, and seeing it portrayed in a movie now, right? You're seeing the culmination of that story and the pieces of it, the little pieces that you put in the world, the kids and the business, right? It's just so all integral to each other. Is it, tell us, is it like, for you, is it like, if you can step back, are you able to say, I can't believe this? I can't believe my entire story. Everything about every movement from when I was 5 is like a dream? Or, I'm just curious, because it does sound like one of those adventures that no one would believe, and yet it happened.
Well, a quick story. I was born in 1961. And in 1970, I was only about 8 or 9 years old around that time. That is when the Vietnam War spilled into Cambodia. And I remember clearly the first time I went to watch the protesting during that time, anti-government protesting, when the government opened fire and killed 11 or 12 people on a small little province in Cambodia during that time.
And you as a boy watched that.
I was the boy watching that. When I come home, I get smacked silly because my father get bullied, ticked off, for everything that he tell me not to do, to hide away from it, to stay away from it. Here I am, stick my head into that. So now you know where Jaclyn's coming from with the whole entire, Did
Jaclyn knew that story?
I didn't tell her that story. It's a whole lot of story that Rachel probably remember a whole lot more, because since, Rachel and I have been together for about 36, 37 years now, we share a lot of story. And as the children get older, we keep telling us about different stories for what we've been through, as me and my mom and my younger brother and sister. But the story of my childhood was not too much of a dream. It was always like a nightmare. You go from day to day, you don't even know. And I learned how to just steal food just to survive. I learned, if anybody saw Year Zero, the part that David had me play as a captain in that village, the guy that responsible for probably kill hundreds of people.
This is to the audience. This is the short film that David had done. Right.
So that was a part of the story. When I came to this country at the age of 17, I have about 3 years of education. I learned how to speak English. I learned how to get to work right away. So all of this put together, it was just, it just made me who I am today. And I'm glad that have a lot of problem when I first came to this country because of what I've been through. 7 members of my family was killed.
It's unimaginable.
Yeah, 7 members of my family was killed. And here I am trying to stay, you know, and to live my American dream.
It's beyond that. It's what I mean by absurdity, that after surviving that, you needed to build a family.
Right.
And you opened up a martial arts studio, and you probably joined the PTA, and you took your kids for ice cream. You had to do normal things. After living the extraordinary, the grotesque, the atrocious, surviving the atrocious, you had to somehow normalize, reintegrate yourself into a world that drove a station wagon and went to Little League baseball games and taught your kids martial arts. To me, that's what I mean by the absurdity of it. You know, how is that even possible that a person can regain their humanity and then go for ice cream with their kids? It just seems, you know, opening up a business, worrying about things that regular people worry about.
It's really tough. It's really tough. I mean, but what I go through, it's just like one quick comment that, you know, I just a quick comparison that I have children that love animals. They treat animals like their own children, as you can see, Jaclyn and then Raquel. And then here I am to bring to Cambodia, survive because I have to eat any animal that can crawl and walk just to stay alive. And now I see my kid spend thousands of dollars and treat the animal just like the baby that they just. So that was the absurd part that I have to go through, right? It was, you know, to see the kind of the passion that my children have compared to what I came through with such a thick scars in my heart, that my wife always said to me, you know, you have no heart. Your heart is so calloused up. And to see that and all of these change, that it wasn't easy. But one thing I have learned, the more you talk about it, the better it can help you heal and can help you get along with the society.
Quick question, and I'm going to ask 2 quick questions. I'm going to take a couple questions, 1 question from the audience, and we'll say goodnight. Your brother and sister, do they respond to the world like you?
My brother and sister, I have 3 sisters that three sisters and 2 brothers, right? And the 3 youngest one, they barely remember really little about what they've been through in Cambodia. Got to remember, at the time they was like 9, 7,
I understand.
5 when they came over. But the other 2 that are next to me, they in their late 50 now, and they really resilient, just like what.
So the family, this is a family trait. It's not
Yes, it is. And if you go through the killing field, if you survive the killing field, you know better during that time what you've been through. When you come in there, you become really resilient to what's going on.
You gave us a classic folks moment. That was phenomenal. Jaclyn, you want to add to that?
No, I just want to say, you know, my dad's the oldest of all the 6. There's 6 of them total. And, you know, hearing all the stories and everything, I think, first of all, we always joke, but are serious. My dad has 9 lives. Like, there's no way he should still be alive right now, especially the amount of time he's gotten caught, the crazy things that they, you know, did in Cambodia, but also without him, I don't know that our family would have made it out of Cambodia, because my dad did crazy stuff like sneak into like military warehouses to get a pencil to forge a letter from a captain to get his family to be able to come into like the net, like which they would have caught him. You're dead. You're just dead. And you know, he is I mean, and obviously my mom, my grandma, between the 2 of them, they both just have this like survival mode where there's no way that I don't think that they would have made it out of Cambodia without my dad being the older brother and doing the crazy things that
and as I said before, I was hoping that the 2 of you and David would realize that I think that given the enormity of what your father survived, it's not normal, the enormity, the hugeness of it, that it couldn't help but spill over into his kids. It couldn't help but somehow translate over. I have one last question, and then we'll take one from the audience. We'll say goodnight. This was a wonderful hour. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Yes, I
We
did.
all benefited enormously from hearing you. One question about Ann Arbor and Bad Axe. It seems to me that the movie is a contrast of two towns. It just so happens that the kids went to Ann Arbor, one of the most liberal, progressive cities in America. Happens to be in a battleground state, but in the country, it's the equivalent of NYU here in New York. You know, you could name it's the equivalent. It's that progressive, and that's where everyone came from. They were students there, and they worked there. You did, right? So there is this contrast in the film, again, implicit, right? That life would be easier if we were living in Ann Arbor. And here is, as much as we love Bad Axe, this is not easy for Cambodian Americans with a xenophobic president in a pandemic that's being blamed on Asia. I mean, this is not ideal for the Sievs to be in the middle of this powder keg and to have a very rebellious protesting daughter who's very of open mind and of her own individual mind, and says, look, I'm going to say what I need to say. And David's passion in saying, this is bothering me, and I'm going to turn my camera on it, and I'm going to show it. I'm going to show what it looks like. The town, it's not, I wouldn't say that Bad Axe is the bad guy in the movie. And I know you don't want that, but invariably it's not a flattering portrait, you know, and I think Ann Arbor doesn't help. Am I wrong with that? Am I being too harsh?
Oh, Ann Arbor and Bad Axe are completely opposite, completely opposite. You know, I lived in Ann Arbor for 14 years, and then I moved back to Bad Axe during the pandemic. But I chose to move back to Bad Axe. Like what Ann Arbor doesn't have is my family. Like my family's here at Bad Axe. So, you know, you can put anything you want in the Ann Arbor column, and I love it for all that it is. But like my family, it outweighs everything. But you know, with the Bad Axe, we did grow up here, and that is part of who made us who we are, like the good and the bad. We wouldn't be who we are without Bad Axe. The restaurant, obviously, people have supported us through the years, or else we would have shut down back in the day when we failed as a donut shop and then as an ice cream shop and then everything else that we failed at. But we did have that like core level of people that genuinely wanted to see us and our family succeed. So, you know, I will take that. Like, and I think that it can get better, but how can it get better if new people with different ideas don't help open up other people's minds? Like, how can you expect a place to get better if nobody wants to come back and try to help make it better? You know,
David, you know, the movie toward the end ends, it's not a political statement, and yet it is in some ways. It showcases the victory speech of the Biden administration when they first called the election and they knew that the Democrats had prevailed. And you film those first early moments of the Democrat, I think it's either Vice President Harris or Biden, you know, basically thanking the nation for their support. You know, you don't live now in Bad Axe, right?
Not really. I mean, I've been traveling a lot.
He comes home all the time.
I was going to say,
all the time.
It seems to me that among the family members, and just if you can say it quickly, and then I'll ask this question. It seems to me that you were the one, maybe because you were living here in Brooklyn, that was most critical of your hometown.
Absolutely. I think that's very fair to say. Because like I mentioned in those early edits, I was at a place of
you were mad,
resentment, and after, you know, having not lived there full time for so long, and then coming back to this and, you know, seeing that not everyone in the world is like Bad Axe, I was incredibly angry. But, you know, there is that moment when, and Jaclyn kind of just mentioned this, but where my wife turns the camera on me and, you know, she's like, we need to talk about this love letter concept, because when I said that to my dad, I don't know if I fully believed in that I was writing this love letter to Bad Axe. I think that was just like a knee-jerk reaction to being scolded at by your dad and trying to find a way to defend yourself. But it was through the realization of making this film and seeing how much our family came together this year and the resilience that we had. It made me realize that Bad Axe has made us who we are for all that it is. And it's a love letter to Bad Axe because that love is so unconditional, right? And it's something that you can't give up on. You have to have hope in it. And I don't know if I necessarily felt that back in those early days of editing. I think that was something I truly realized in the process of being back home and seeing how our family was still prevailing, that I realized that, Bad Axe has made us who we are. And I am so grateful for that. And I wouldn't change where I grew up for any, I wouldn't change it for even Ann Arbor, which is a city that I love. I would still choose to have my upbringing been in Bad Axe at the end of the day.
That's a wonderful summation for the night. Let's leave it at that. Before we say goodnight to David, Chun, and Jaclyn, do we have some announcements? Yes, Bad Axe, of course, is being released nationally on Friday. It'll be in theaters around the country, and it's also on video on demand. I think our chat box now gives you some information on how to see it. I think all those of you who watched, you can all agree this is an incredibly tantalizing film. If you haven't seen it yet, I think we've tempted you to watch this film. As I said earlier, this movie will change you. And it's very rare that you can say that about a film, and certainly a documentary. It's that powerful. It's that honest. It's that authentic. It's that sort of morally necessary. And it does in some ways restore people's faith in humanity at a time where people are losing faith in humanity. Before we say goodnight to the Sievs, Giving Tuesday, next Tuesday, I think, or is coming up, not next Tuesday, or maybe the week thereafter. Don't forget FOLCS in your life. We haven't been charging throughout the pandemic as we went virtual, so try to remember us as well. If you haven't signed up for some of our events, please do, the folks.org. We've got some really great events we're not announcing yet until the next few weeks, but one of them is our very popular series, Conversations on Essential Cinema. And the film, I'm not going to tell you the special guest, but the film is Chariots of Fire. So if any of you remember that film, we're showing Chariots of Fire with a very, very special guest that's appropriate for the film. David, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Wish you extraordinary luck, and we have every faith that the nominations for awards will continue. Jaclyn, there's an enormous amount to admire about you, and this film features you and showcases so much of who you are as a person. It in many ways is a love letter to an older sister. Congratulations on your new family. And for the heroism that you've demonstrated in so many different ways. And Chun, your survival is an inspiration to all of us, not just to your kids. Please know that to be true. Bad Axe, don't miss it on Friday. I'm Thane Rosenbaum for FOLCS. Until next time, good night.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you, Thane.